be operating under a 5-minute rule this morning, and we'll be this afternoon, and we'll be using the timer system for our hearing to keep track of our time. I'll now begin with an opening statement. Well, today we are marking up fiscal year 2018 appropriations bill for the Department of Homeland Security. The mark stands in sharp contrast to past recommendations, primarily because the new administration's budget request represents a major shift in policy for how DHS secures the border and enforces immigration laws. As a consequence, some of the recommendations in this mark will very likely be opposed by our ranking member, Ms. Roble-Allard, and others on the subcommittee. While I regret not having a unified subcommittee mark, I respect the right of the minority to assert reasonable and honest dissent. More importantly, I know that Ms. Roble-Allard and everyone on this subcommittee share in the same objective for DHS, to secure a homeland that is safe, secure, and resilient against terrorism and other hazards. Therefore, I want to thank the ranking member for being willing to collaborate constructively as the mark evolved, knowing that we would diverge at the end. I also want to acknowledge our very able subcommittee staff, Derek Newby, Matt Smith, Robin Ellerby, Chris Mallard, Laura Silke, Chris Romig, Leonardo Fendali, Valerie Baldwin, and our personal staff, Adam Sachs and Grady Bourne. And we appreciate all of them very much for their contributions and for their hard work. And I remind everybody that we are now in the 7th month of this year, and this is our 2nd round of complete appropriations in 7 months, which is a very rare event in this Congress. And as far as I'm concerned, I hope we never do it again. This year, the subcommittee had more than 2,160 requests, including 194 from all of you. Most all of them were accommodated. For those of you with amendments, however, thank you for waiting until full committee to offer them. The recommendation for fiscal year 2018 Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill is $42.5 billion in non-defense discretionary spending, $1.9 billion in defense spending, excuse me, and $6.8 billion for disaster relief, a total of $51.1 billion, which is $333 million above the President's request and $1.8 billion above fiscal year 2017 baseline. I want to thank Chairman Freelandhausen for the generous increase to our 302B allocation over the existing baseline, despite a top line for non-defense discretionary funds that is lower than fiscal year in 2017. Without this increase, the recommendations of this mark would not have been made possible. The subcommittee mark includes, for CBP, $1.6 billion to fully fund the President's request to build 3 segments of wall and fence in San Diego, in South Texas, which are areas the Border Patrol says are vulnerable to cartels, traffickers, illegal migration, and terrorists. $440 million to buy almost all the critical enablers CBP needs to do their jobs safely and effectively, and including things like sensors, trucks, better roads, communications equipment, radar sensors, and aviation assets. As requested, the mark supports increased Border Patrol by 500 agents. $7.0 billion for 44,000 detention beds, an increase of 4,676 over fiscal year 2017. $18 million above the request to expand the visa security program to 2 additional high-threat overseas locations. $186 million to increase the investigative and support staff by 1,600 as requested. For FEMA, $3.0 billion for FEMA grant programs, an increase of $939.7 million above the request, which includes a $25 million increase to the nonprofit security grant program. $7.3 billion as requested for the Disaster Relief Fund. For the Secret Service, $1.9 billion to ensure they are paid for the work they do. For TSA, full funding for transportation security officers to support aviation security and keep wait times low. For Coast Guard, $19 million is provided for the heavy icebreaker to continue program management activities and design work required to award a production contract in fiscal year 2019. $500 million for production of the first offshore patrol cutter and long lead materials for the OPC number 2. And $95 million for a fully missioned C-130J to enhance long-range surveillance capabilities. And for cybersecurity and infrastructure protection, $950 million is provided to secure government networks and prevent cyber attacks. And $380 million is for infrastructure protection programs, including the electrical grid and emergency communication systems. Finally, the E-Verify system, which enables businesses to check whether their employers are eligible to work in the United States, is fully funded by $131.5 million. Colleagues, this is a good bill, and I ask each of you to support it. I'm happy to answer questions about their mark. And before I do, I ask Ranking Member Ms. Roble-Allard, I recognize her, and then I will recognize the full committee's chairman and ranking members for comments that they would like to make. Ms. Roble-Allard.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, just as in prior years, you and your staff have been collegial, collaborative, and receptive throughout the development of this bill and report. As the Appropriations Subcommittee Chairman, you carry out your responsibilities honorably, fairly, and collaboratively. Together, we take seriously the Department's requirements and the needs of its dedicated personnel because we understand they are the ones doing the hard work of keeping our country safe. In the past few years, we have been able to bridge our differences sufficiently to produce a subcommittee bill that Democrats could support. While we continue to have a good working relationship, the new administration has significantly changed the dynamic on immigration enforcement, and the result, unfortunately, is that I cannot in good conscience support this year's bill in its current form. Most alarming to me is that this bill recommends a $705 million increase for immigration enforcement in the interior of the United States, supporting 44,000 detention beds and an increase of 4,673 from the current year and 10,000 above last year. It would also support the hiring of 1,000 additional ICE officers and agents who would be focused primarily on interior enforcement. The administration has claimed that, and I quote, "The stepped-up enforcement of our nation's immigration laws in the interior of the United States is critically important to the national security and public safety of the United States," end quote. While there is certainly no disagreement we should be removing dangerous individuals from our country, ICE is targeting the parents of unaccompanied children who cross the southern border to seek asylum. It is targeting people who lived, worked, and paid taxes in this country for years or even decades with no criminal infractions. As a result, ICE interior arrests of non-criminals are up 157% over last year. These arrests are not required for national security or public safety, and they have tragic consequences for individuals, families, and communities all over this country. Many in law enforcement tell us people are afraid to report serious crimes, including acts of domestic violence, and they are less willing to come forward as witnesses to crimes. Teachers tell me that immigrant and United States citizen children alike are afraid to go to school or to just go out and play for fear their parents will be gone when they return home. The trauma that is being inflicted on entire communities throughout our country cannot be overstated. Being in this country illegally is a civil violation. So why would we choose to fund such excessive civil immigration enforcement instead of activities to combat real terrorist and criminal threats? Comprehensive immigration reform is the only solution to this problem. However, for years, the majority in the House has blocked bipartisan efforts to fix the problem by combining strong enforcement with a path to legal status for many who are already living in the United States. To those who insist the law is the law and we must enforce it without discretion, I say this is a moral question as much as a legal one. Just as other law enforcement agencies have discretion in how they enforce laws, ICE too has discretion in enforcing our immigration laws fairly and justly. We on this committee also have discretion. Our job is to prioritize and make choices in how best to invest taxpayer dollars to protect and ensure the safety of our homeland. Existing resources used wisely are sufficient for addressing the threat posed by criminal aliens who are truly dangerous. Another area of concern is the $1.6 billion in the bill for new border infrastructure. The FY 2017 funding bill required the Secretary to submit a risk-based plan for improving security along the border, but we have yet to receive that plan. Although this bill would fund only discrete segments of border infrastructure, how can we support anything without a comprehensive plan backed by clear justification that warrants the enormous cost per mile and makes the case for why it should be a priority over other investments? The truth is that the President's malignant rhetoric on immigration has poisoned the waters on this issue, making anything this administration proposes suspect. I simply cannot support throwing scarce taxpayer dollars at a campaign promise. We should be investing more of our limited resources in cybersecurity, human trafficking investigations, and Coast Guard vessels and aircraft, because currently our drug interdiction efforts intercept only a fraction of the drugs that are out there. We should be investing much more in new customs officers and research and technology, and should restore funding for TSA's Law Enforcement Officer Reimbursement Program and VIPER program. As I mentioned earlier, I regret that I must oppose this bill because it does include provisions that I support, including restoration of FEMA preparedness grants to current year levels and increasing the nonprofit security grant program from $25 million to $50 million. There are also a significant number of constructive oversight directives in the draft committee report and welcome funding for levels for departmental oversight components, such as the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. And I am grateful for the additional funding for child care subsidies for Coast Guard families and continuing the cybersecurity internship program. Mr. Chairman, I hope we can continue to work together so that by the end of this year's appropriations process, we can produce a final bill that both sides can fully support. Let me end by reiterating my appreciation for the way this subcommittee goes about doing its business. Even when we must disagree, we do it with respect for one another and respect for the institution in which we are honored to serve. And since we all know that the business of the subcommittee is often carried out through the staff that work for us, I would be remiss if I did not say thank you to my staff, Matt Smith, Robin Ellerby, Adam Sachs, and Derek Newby, and to the majority staff, including Chris Mallard, Chris Romig, Laura Silke, Leonardo Finaldi, Grady Bourne, and Subcommittee Staff Director Valerie Baldwin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Roll-Allard. I'll now recognize Chairman Freelandhausen, the chairman of the full committee.
I'd like the record to note I'm sitting between two Texans.
Good shape, you're in good shape.
I am in very good shape, and let me pay tribute to all the members of the committee and to both the ranking and the chairman for the collegiality that sort of makes up the whole appropriations process. We appreciate all of your dedication to the job, and a certain special shout out to all those staff members who put together a pretty amazing bill in a relatively short period of time, and I think hopefully did justice to many of the nation's needs. The Homeland Security bill for 2018 provides necessary funding to programs that support our first responders, a lot of different first responders, and I think on behalf of the Congress and certainly this committee, we pay tribute to many of those men and women who put their lives on the line each and every day. We thank you for what you do. Earlier this year, we witnessed terrorist threats being made against hundreds of Jewish institutions, including schools and synagogues, some located in my home state of New Jersey, and I know around the country. I'm very pleased, Mr. Chairman, to report that your legislation increases funding to FEMA, the nonprofit security grants, which would be available to institutions of all faiths and religions. And further, let me credit you for the key investments you're making in the department, and particularly the focus on cyber, because as great as a workforce we have, a lot of things can happen when bad people try to intrude in our space. And I want to thank you for your efforts and know that it's a joint effort with you and Ms. Roybal-Allard. Thank you very much.
Now recognize Ms. Loy, the ranking member of the full committee. Ms. Loy.
Thank you, Chairman Carter, Ranking Member Roybal-Allard, and Chairman Frelinghuysen for holding this markup today. As I noted in this morning's full committee markup, our budget and appropriations process has been far from the regular order that the majority has continually promised. A new bipartisan budget agreement must be negotiated in order to enact appropriation bills into law. Well, with all of these procedural roadblocks hindering our path forward, one might think the majority would produce bills that could possibly gain support from Democrats by, for example, not funding excessive immigration enforcement that targets non-criminals, separates families, and disrupts communities in every one of our congressional districts. Yet, that has not happened. The bill before us provides some minority input on funding, including the restoration of proposed cuts to FEMA grants, which are important to my home state of New York. And the chairman was receptive to many of the minority's requests for report language. However, this bill unacceptably provides significant increases to carry out the administration's draconian immigration enforcement priorities and underfunds other DHS priorities as a result. The subcommittee's allocation is $1.9 billion over the current level, and nearly $250 million more than President Trump's request. While other bills have been severely cut, this bill would waste $1.6 billion on the president's boondoggle of a wall on the U.S.-Mexican border, more than $700 million on thousands of new detention beds, and ICE enforcement officers. These funds would be much better spent on other priorities, both in this bill and in several of the others. In this bill, we should be investing more in research through the Science and Technology Directorate to help fill the department's technology and equipment gaps, not cutting it by $87 million. We should be increasing TSA's law enforcement officer reimbursement program, not eliminating it. In other bills, $1.9 billion would go a long way toward helping our children achieve their potential in the labor HHS bill, rebuild trust between our communities and law enforcement in the CJS bill, or helping hardworking Americans achieve their small business goals in the financial services bill. There's no good reason for the majority in the House to continue to fritter away the time, unable to produce a workable budget, and unable to put together bills that have a chance of becoming law. Democrats are eager to support bills that include appropriate spending levels and are free from misguided, politically driven policies. The sooner we can begin to do that, the sooner we can actually enact our bills. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. Any other members want to make opening remarks? You do?
First thing, I do want to acknowledge the hard work of staff. You know, it amazes me how great both majority and minority staff on appropriations were working day and nights to pull this together. And any good leader will tell you you're only as good as your team. So thanks, staff, whatever you do. I think it was wise that both the chairman and ranking member wanted us to specialize on this committee, and you've asked me and Dan Newhouse to specialize in cyber. And just a little bit, I want to tell you where we are right now, and then what you've done here, and where I think we need to go in the future. Just recently, and my background, I was been involved with cyber since about 2004. And I've worked, and it stays in my district, and I spend a lot of time on their budget and defense approach and my former job on the Intelligence Committee. But I've always been concerned about the focus of Homeland and the fact that we have enough money, do we have the personnel, do we have the expertise that we do need. Now, I think I've been saying that, but I think it's about time I stop saying that. And this is what we have, and we have to make it better. So what we're going to try to do is come up with a plan, and I know Dan and I will probably have a report down the road, not now, and this will be a lot of it for the future. I visited National Security Communications Integration Center, called NKIC, met with, it's called ICS CERT, Industrial Control System Response Team. They're one of the best in the world. They go to Estonia to help, and they're a part of Homeland. And I've got some classified briefings along with Representative Newhouse, my staff, and his staff, and ask them, what do you need? Where do you need to go? And I think the number one issue they came out with was the number one issue is 050 funding. Now, what's that? The way it is now, the funding for Homeland comes from defense. And it seems, I don't know how it happened, why it happened, but this is coming from defense. When I met with the former head of Cybersecurity for Homeland under the Obama administration about maybe a month ago, and he agreed with what the staff says now. They need to have more money, of course, for resources, but also the funding mechanism on how this is moving forward. So it's something that we're going to have to move forward with. I went to Kay Granger, and being a member, as you and I are, Defense Appropriations, and she said, I don't have any more money left to give it over to cyber. Well, that's something that we're going to have to work on in the future. But I do want to say, and I want to thank you all, the leadership, both majority ranking and whatever, that in the past year, the discrepancy from Homeland for cybersecurity has been $100 million. And this year, I think in cybersecurity, we have the discrepancies 28. So good job. And this is where we need to go. And I want to say this, that we talk about Russia, China, Iran, all the threats we have that are out there, North Korea. But cybersecurity is one of the most serious threats that we have. And the Homeland Security, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think that Homeland should be the mechanism for dealing with cybersecurity because it's so serious. In the beginning, I thought it should be a direct line to the president and the subcommittee, whatever. Well, that's not where it is. So we're going to move forward here. But right now, we have industrial control systems that we know other countries are involved with, electrical grid, financial institutions, hospital, citizens in cyberspaces. These are all things that have already been attacked. And, so we really have to take a strong look. And right now, I think if you look at where we are in cybersecurity, we're way behind. So we need to start focusing for the future, and that's what I'm talking about. And I'm going to say something in the markup, but basically, I know we'll work together on this, and I think it makes a big difference. I know the Obama administration, when we were trying to get bills passed, called CISPA, 80% of the network in our country is controlled by the private sector. So we have to work together with government and the private sector. And yet we couldn't get bills passed. We could get it passed in the House, amazingly enough, but they'd kill it in the Senate and that type of thing. But now, after Sony, which is the first destructive attack we've had, now the Obama administration worked with us to get that passed. I bring all this up because I'm saying this is a real threat. As we speak right now, China steals $2 billion a year from us. We've got Russia all over our systems. I mean, this is getting more serious and serious. And yet, if you look at the percentage of funding that we have that goes to cybersecurity, which is really Homeland, it's very, very low. And I think the fact that this is our baby now, we're here, we need to make it a goal for the future to make sure we start looking at this funding, including that 050 I talked about. So I want to stop. I do have to say something, one thing, and I don't like to go negative when you're in a minority. You go negative, it hurts you, I guess. But bottom line, I think I like the border construction. That was a visual in a campaign. And, it just seems to me that you build a wall, you can go over a wall, you can go under a wall. I mean, let's talk about technology and what we really do need. And I really like the fact that we have $100 million in for 500 new Border Patrol. We have $131 million for new border technology. That's fantastic. That's where we need to put our money. 106 new aircraft and sensors. I mean, this is the type of thing we need if we're going to have the border security, and $109 million for non-intrusive inspection equipment. And we need to understand that we, as Americans, there's a lot of issues about immigration. We got to resolve this. We almost did it when the Senate passed it. And if we don't, it's just tearing our country apart more than anything. So I hope this committee, and I respect everybody on this committee, I've worked with some of you for a long time, that we can really start focusing on how to treat people, how we can get the law. We have to stop people at our borders, there's no question. But we have to deal with this immigration situation in the right way, because all of the world will be looking. Go back.
Thank you, Mr. Lucifer. Is there anyone else who wishes to make opening remarks? The chair recognizes any members for the purpose of making amendments. Are there any amendments to this bill? There being none, no amendments. I recognize distinguished member from Texas, Mr. Culberson, for motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the subcommittee report the bill favorably to the full committee.
The question is on the gentleman's motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those who oppose, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed.
Chairman, that was Jack Murphy style. Remember Jack Murphy? So quick.
We still didn't break. We didn't break the record though, but we worked at it.
Yep.
Well, I'm serious. The fact that we did 2 appropriations processes in 7 months is our staff really, truly, they need a real attaboy, attagirl, because they really did a great job. And we couldn't do it without real professionals doing the work.
May I ask the chairman of the Freeland House another question? You're sitting,
At your own risk.
you're sitting between two Texans. What does that mean? Hook 'em horns.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. I got it. Yeah, you added on to this meeting with your comments, yeah. We would have been out of
There
here
being
10
no
minutes
further
ago.
business,
I got
meeting's
it.
adjourned.
We would have been out here 20 minutes ago. Old filibuster over here.
Yeah.